Everyone. So I'm glad to present you today this joint work with Thomas Douenne. Um, as you know, like the big impediment to carbon taxes is social acceptance. Um, and we've seen that with the Yellow Vest movement, as the increase in the carbon tax was the motive for the first protest in November 2018. But at the same time, survey evidence show that French people are preoccupied by climate change. This is their first top priority with 90% of people who say they are preoccupied by climate change, and this is twice as much as insecurity. And we also find that more people in France would give priority to fighting climate change rather than growth or unemployment. So what can explain these paradoxical attitudes towards the carbon tax or climate policies? Well, a simple hypothesis is that the current carbon taxes are actually regressive. Um, and so this is why people oppose it. And if the revenues, instead of funding the general budget, were redistributed equally among households, which we call a tax and dividend policy, then people would support it because it would be fair and a majority of people would benefit from it in their purchasing power. But is this really sufficient? So, because for that, you would need that people have beliefs that corresponds to the actual properties of the tax and dividend scheme. They would need to understand that it's progressive, for example. So we addressed this question based on a new large representative survey of the French population conducted in the middle of the Yellow Vest crisis, so in February and March 2019. And to give you a primer of the results, we find that most people oppose a tax and dividend. This is because they hold pessimistic beliefs about it. And we document how these beliefs may be formed. Notably through distrust or motivated reasoning. And yeah, we show that the rejection is driven by these pessimistic beliefs, that if we could convince people of the true incidence and effectiveness of the tax, then we would have a majority approval. So we contribute to two strands of the literature. The first is on the political economy of the carbon tax. So we use the finding of previous literature, which find three key motives for accepting a carbon tax: that it's in one's self-interest, that it's environmentally effective at fighting pollution and climate change, and that it's socially fair or progressive. And we add to literature the fact that we were able to estimate objective net gains in terms of purchasing power from the reform for each respondent, thanks to a model that we apply to the energy characteristics that they feel. This allows us to acknowledge and quantify biases in perceptions regarding self-interest, while previous surveys use objective self-interest measures, such as the number of cars owned. And this way of distinguishing pure effect of preferences from beliefs regarding the properties of the tax allow us to estimate causal effects of each motive on acceptance of the tax, while previous surveys essentially show correlations. We also contribute to the literature on belief formation. So there is a growing literature on economics that links beliefs and preferences for policies that has essentially been on immigration or redistribution. So we add a climate policy to that literature. And we also contribute to literature on motivated reasoning by suggesting a bidirectional causality from beliefs to attitudes and reciprocally. So I don't have time to present the survey and data in detail. It's a sample of 3,000 respondents, and we ensured that the data is good quality by different procedures, such as removing, like not including in the sample respondent who answered too quickly or things like that. So the talk will be in 3 sections. So first, I represent perceptions, then how perceptions vary when we present informational treatments, and finally estimate the effect of beliefs on acceptance. And within each section, I will review in turn each motive, so self-interest, environmental effectiveness, and progressivity. So our main reform of interest is a tax and dividend corresponding to an increase in the fuel taxes of 50 euros per ton of CO2. So we don't show to the respondents this number, but we show them the corresponding price increases in terms of the different fuels. And we also tell them that each adult would receive a check of 110 euros per year. We compute this figure using standard estimates from the literature regarding tax incidence and elasticities. Well, so I have a smaller elasticity than the one of Aurélien, but this is like the median elasticity we find for France in the literature. So so then we asked the respondent whether they think their household would lose, win, or be unaffected by the reform in terms of purchasing power. And depending on their answer, to specify their expected loss or gain in different intervals. And as you can see, after we ask for their approval, and there is a large rejection of the carbon tax and dividend. So only 10% approve of it, and to gain tighter confidence interval, we'll use mainly in the paper the notion of acceptance that bundles people who approve of the tax and dividend and those who say, I don't know, I don't want to answer. So here are the perceptions regarding the self-interest. So the graph shows the probability density function of subjective in red versus objective in blue net gains from the scheme. And as you can see, there is a big gap between the two, while objectively, we find that 70% of households should win from the reform, only 14% think they win, and 64% think they would lose. So about like 90% of respondents underestimate their gain, and half of them by a large amount. So regarding environmental effectiveness, there also is pessimism in the beliefs, as 2/3 of respondents think the reform would be ineffective to reduce pollution and fight climate change. So here, an explanation that that can be found in literature is that people don't understand how Pigouvian taxes work, and they would think that people's consumption is inelastic. So this is not what we find here. We have questions on subjective elasticities. So asking respondent, so facing plus 50 cents per liter increase in gasoline price, how would French people adjust their gasoline consumption? And similar question for natural gas, etc. And their responses are aligned with the estimates from literature. So another way to interpret that is that although people might understand that fuel taxes can reduce fuel consumption, they may find the effect too low. And effectively, our reform would reduce French greenhouse gases emission by about 1%, which is far from the official goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. Regarding progressivity, again, people have pessimistic beliefs. The 3/5 think that the reform would be detrimental to poor households, yet it is clear from the data that the reform would on average be progressive. So can we change the beliefs by presenting some informations to the respondent? To answer this question, we propose a feedback to 2/3 of the respondents, and we tell them that in 5 cases out of 6, a household with your characteristics would win or lose depending on what we find through the reform. And so we compute this win-lose prediction using the characteristic answered at the beginning of the survey and using a model from official survey data that maps characteristics of households to their fuel consumption. Then we ask again, would they lose, win, or be unaffected by the reform with this new information? And would you approve the reform? The two main results is that, so those that are predicted to lose update correctly on average. So 86% of them align with our feedback, while winners do not update nearly enough. Only 25% align with our feedback. So there is conservatism in the update of beliefs and pessimisms, meaning that the conservatism is only for those to whom we inform they would win. So the possible interpretations is that respondents do not trust us, or maybe they do not trust not our estimation, but they do not trust the fact that the government would actually deliver on its promise to distribute the dividend. Another interpretation is that people don't have a point estimate of their possible gain or loss. They have a distribution of their net gain, and they don't answer with the expected value of this distribution of net gains, but because of loss aversion, they report a more pessimistic answer. And they reason with a more pessimistic. Another interpretation is motivated reasoning. So respondents revise their beliefs only when new information is in favor of their skeptical prior attitudes against the tax and dividend. So this motivated reasoning means that prior attitudes, so in this case, in favor or against the tax, affects the way one processes new information and affects belief formation. And finally, there can be misreporting strategically or not. So we can look at the determinants of correctly updating the beliefs of winning. So here we restrict our analysis to the subsample of people who should have updated, meaning people who said they were losing, although we find they were winning, or the contrary. So the first column is just a way to put some stars in the previous results. That's winners update much more correctly than losers. But the third column is interesting. It shows that those who originally approve of the reform have a higher propensity to correctly update by 16 percentage points, and on the contrary, the more one is says that that they are close to the yellow vest, the less they correctly update. And we don't find such an effect for the traditional left-right spectrum. And actually, in all our data, when we include the left-right traditional spectrum and the yellow vest is always the one that explains the results, and not the left-right political spectrum. So this is evidence, or this is not a proof, but this goes in the direction of motivated reasoning, in the sense that prior political attitudes affect the way people update their beliefs. It's not a proof because it could be due to distrust as well. The distrust could be correlated with initial political attitudes. Then there is, so we show informational treatment on the effectiveness of the tax. So the information is that there is scientific consensus that carbon taxes are effective. And there is also some informational treatment randomly displayed or not at the beginning of the survey regarding climate change, so its consequences, its magnitude, and the air pollution. And so we find significant effects of this treatment on the beliefs that the reform is effective, although the effect remained small. However, on progressivity, our informational treatment that where we explain why the reform would be progressive has no effect whatsoever. So we won't be able to use it as an instrument in our two-stage least square that I present right now. So to compute the effect of each motive on acceptance, our favorite specification is a variant of the tax and dividend that we call tax and targeted dividend, where instead of redistributing the revenues so the same tax as before among all adults, we redistribute them among the bottom 20, 30, 40, or 50% of the income distribution. So we have 4 variants, and each respondent is allocated randomly to a variant where they are eligible to the payment or not. So, for example, where if you are at the bottom at the percentile 25th of the income distribution, either you would face the reform targeted to the bottom 20% of the income distribution. So in which case you would not be eligible to the dividend, or you would face the reform targeted to the bottom 30%, in which case you would be eligible. And so we would use this exogenous variation in eligibility to instrument the beliefs are of winning or losing, so the beliefs of self-interest, which is the endogenous variable for our two-stage least square regression on approval of the reform. So this is a fuzzy RDD design, and to give you a visual primer, so this is the acceptance rate of the reform depending on the income of the respondent. And so here I represented only those who face the reform targeted to the bottom 20%. And you see that those who are in the bottom 20% have a higher acceptance rate than those who are not, who are above. And this is the effect of self-interest. Here I add those who face the reform targeted to the bottom 30%, 40%, 50%, etc. And so what we exploit is the variation between the dotted line and the full line above one another. So here are the results of our fuzzy RDD. Our local average real effect in our favorite specification is of 57 percentage points, meaning that the belief that one does not lose is causally associated with a higher acceptance rate by 57 percentage points. This is very comparable to another identification strategy where we use the feedback as the instrument in two-stage least square that exploits the exogenous variation of the win-lose feedback around the zero net gain threshold. And our results are broadly consistent with a simple OLS, where we are quite confident that the coefficient in the simple OLS is well estimated because we have the powerful control, which is the acceptance of the tax at the initial level, so before we present the variant. So we conduct the same type of two-stage least square procedures for environmental effectiveness. So here, the first stage is the effect of the informational treatment on the beliefs that the reform is effective, and the second stage, the effect that the belief on acceptance. And we find local averagement effect of about 50 percentage points, again somewhat higher than the simple OLS averagement effect of 40 percentage points. And this small discrepancy can be explained by by the fact that the compliers are not are somewhat specific. As we've seen earlier, those who can be convinced by informational treatment tend to be more in favor of taxes already. So for progressivity, we cannot run a two-stage square because our first stage doesn't work. So what we do is that we conduct a simple OLS and present non-causal results. It shows that if we include only progressivity, it's associated to acceptance by 50 percentage points. Here we include interactions with the other motives. So the effect of progressivity per se, or the correlation accounting for the other motives, is 27 percentage points. This is the average marginal effect at the sample mean. We see also that this suggests that the motives are complementary rather than substitutes, meaning that when someone believes in two motives, then their acceptance is predicted to be about 70 percentage points higher. And when they believe in the three motives, then they practically always support the tax and dividend policy. And this is what allows us to say that the rejection is driven by pessimistic beliefs and not by a rejection of carbon taxes per se. Like, it's not a dislike of French instruments, it's more a disbelief regarding the properties of the tax. So to summarize the key results, French people would largely reject tax and dividend policy, at least during this yellow vest crisis. This is because they have pessimistic perceptions regarding the properties of the scheme. They overestimate the negative impact on their purchasing power. They do not think the policy is environmentally effective. They wrongly perceive it as regressive. Our informational treatments are not really helpful to correct this misperception, but if we could, then the scheme would reach majority acceptance. Yeah, and I just want to mention one disclaimer, is that I think these results are specific to the French context, where the carbon tax was really at the core of the political debate and has been really unpopular since the Yellow Vest movement. But this may not have been the case before the Yellow Vest movement, for example. So thank you very. So yeah, this is that shows that it's crucial to really well design properly the policies at the beginning. Otherwise, you can face long-lasting opposition to the policy, even if you redesign it better afterwards. So thank you very much for your attention. I cannot hear you.
Could I ask you a question?
Okay, yeah, it's good.
Yes. So we have 5 minutes, so we have time for 2-3 questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Very, very interesting paper. I mean, I've seen Thomas presenting it before, but it's a very, very nice in-depth presentation of it. Thank you. One issue I was wondering, you said you asked people also for their position on left and right in terms of political attitudes, preferences. I was wondering how exactly you asked the question. So whether you were asking for, did you ask them, are you perceiving yourself as left wing or right wing, or did you ask for left and right on the economic scale or on the ideological, xenophobic, racist scale, with some questions which would carve that out? See what I'm saying?
So the question was, how would you define yourself? Far left, center, right, far right, and then not only that, but we also included other things, and people could tick multiple choices, and the other were like conservative, liberal, ecologist, patriot, something like that.
Okay, and could you say something whether
And so
it was
yeah,
more ideological left to right or more economic left to right, like government intervention into the economy?
so it's left to the respondent to interpret the question as they see fit. We have no indication for that, and we don't force them to answer like within the left-right spectrum. So actually, half of the sample is indeterminate in terms of the left-right spectrum.
And you said those who do answer, there's no clear effect of their ideological left and right position. Was it right?
Yeah. But the yellow vest is a determinant, but not so much the left-right. Yeah. Actually, you can check. We have a companion paper in ecological economics where you can find these correlations with the left-right spectrum. It's called French attitudes regarding climate policies and climate change and climate policies. Yeah.
I think Aurélien has a question, but you need to unmute. Yes.
Thanks, Adrien. I think it's like the third time we find ourselves in the same session since June, but I like it more and more, this paper, the more I see it. There was one thing that is still not clear. How do you exactly estimate how much they win or lose on a person-by-person basis? Like, what are the expenses or the consumption cost?
So in two parts. So for gasoline and diesel, we use what they answer regarding the kilometers they traveled past year, the fuel consumption of their vehicles, and if they don't know, we impute like the average fuel consumption, and yeah, that's it. And for heating, we ask them for the area of their accommodation and their type of heating, so fuel, gas, or electricity. And for heating, we use INSEE, like official survey data that allows us to map, so from these characteristics to the heating expenditures. So then we have the overall energy expenditures. We apply the standard elasticity, and we find our estimate, and we are able to so using the official survey data, we have two surveys that we use that have the one is focused on housing, and we're able to estimate the regression to find the housing expenditure, and one as also the gasoline and diesel expenditure, and we apply to this second official survey data our estimation that we use in the survey to measure our error rate. And so this is how we find that our binary prediction is wrong in 16% of cases. And these are the cases that are close to zero, basically. We estimate plus 10, although it's minus 10. And so this is why we say to the respondent that in 5 cases over 6, we find that respondent with your characteristics wins always.
I see. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.